Hello, so I'm going to work in Photoshop here, um, and I'm going to show you how I approach sketching the portrait and building it. Now, if you've done the formative work that you should have done leading up to this, practicing the draw along with the generic facial proportions and stuff, you should be familiar with how to construct the basic shapes and axis lines for the portrait. I'm drawing with a mouse in Photoshop, so it's not going to look the same in fluidity as it would as if I were drawing by hand with a pencil. So it's kind of awkward, but I'm going to show you what I'm going to do. First, you would start, and although this looks like a contour line drawing, you should be using sketch technique, where you kind of try to find the line, light, loose, flowing lines, etc. Now, with your work, you're not going to be tracing. You're going to be looking at the picture and drawing freehand. But I want to kind of show you how to, go back to that generic thing. So the eyes are in the middle. You got the generic kind of an egg shape. I'll put a line through the center to show the division of the head. The nose is about halfway between the eyes and the bottom of the chin, and then up a little bit. The mouth line is about halfway between the bottom of the nose and the bottom of the chin, and up a little bit. So there's our generic proportions. And the neckline, so we've got our generic head there. At least for the facial proportions. And I'm just guessing at that, and I'm not too far off. I got my eyes in the right spot, got my nose in the right spot. Looks like the mouth needed to be a little bit higher. So when you draw, make that particular to what you're looking at. So you can start with the generic shapes and then move to the more specific observation of the shapes in your reference. So the neck, and the shoulders. Remember the shoulders, sometimes students want to draw the shoulders down here somewhere, but when you look at this, I wish I would quit doing that. When you look at this, you see the shoulders aren't down here. The shoulders, depending on the angle that you're looking at, are usually lined up somewhere kind of behind your head or at your chin, depending on the angle you take the photo. So I'm going to come back to that, and I'm going to observe, okay, here's my shoulders here. So they're there. Now you should be looking at this as you construct your generic facial proportions. Now what I do, once I have kind of the map laid out of the axis lines, which are these lines dividing it, the basic shapes, which is the head shape, that's when I would come back and try to more accurately sketch in the head. And this one's not too far off. Remember, the hair extends beyond the crown of the head. And then I kind of work my way in. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. And I kind of work my way in. I start, a lot of times I'll start with the hairline. Now, don't draw individual hairs. Treat the hair as a mass. As I do this, I'm going to make this a little bit lighter in this layer here, so that as I draw new things, you can see what I'm doing. So draw the hair as a mass, as a shape. Now, I'm kind of memorizing this. You should be looking at what you're drawing as you draw it. So the hair, don't make a bunch of individual lines. Now, as you refine your drawing and you go to get more accurate, let's do this again. As you refine your drawing and you go to get more accurate, there may be a point where you want to add shapes, but there's kind of a big shape here, kind of a big shape here. I see that, the turn of this hair, light and shadow shapes here. So kind of look for the big shapes of the hair. As you refine it, when you go to shade, sure, you can add some of the flyaway hairs and stuff, but, stick with the structures, the big shapes. Now, another thing that I like to do, a lot of times when students start drawing a portrait, after they get this in, they they go straight for trying to draw eyes, and then they draw these almond footballs with a circle in them, and you're drawing symbols for eyes. And then they go, and you're not drawing the face if you're only drawing the features. So we want to draw the whole face, and we to do this accurately, we want to also draw the negative space. Now, remember, positive space is the subject. Negative space is the areas between things. So if we think of the hair, now typically we think the whole figure is the subject and the area behind it in the background is the negative space, and that's true. But there's also negative space within things. So this forehead shape is negative space. This area between, we want to sketch this. Although it looks like I'm doing contour line drawing, I want you to sketch and build your shapes. Now if I draw this forehead shape, that's what starts to really make this look more like me. And it also helps you start to get your proportions in there. So if I draw that forehead shape, and now you really want to get eyes right, don't just draw almond-shaped footballs with circles in them. Start to actually draw the shapes that are there. So the next thing I like to do after I get that forehead shape is look at the shape of my eyebrows. Sketch those in. Again, I'm making kind of contour lines here. I'd like to see you using sketch technique with those loose searching lines. And now to get my eyes correct, this is like magic. Between the eyebrow and the top of my eye, there's this negative space. If I draw this shape that's in between my eye and eyebrow, it's like magic how accurate you'll start to get the eyes. And then, after I get that in, if things like eyelashes and stuff, don't worry about that until after the fact. Now again, you're drawing this freehand, you're not just tracing on a computer, and you're using sketch technique with loose light lines that you refine as you go further. Now here, the next thing I like to do, I notice I'm drawing the whites of the eyes. And because the whites of the eyes have their own shape, this tear duct has its own shape, this pupil has its own shape, and now I've got an eye that looks like an eye, and I have never once drawn some almond football shape to plug in. I'm drawing this eye. So if you draw the actual shapes that are there, really looking like putting together puzzle pieces. Here's a puzzle piece, the shape of this white of the eye here. Here's a puzzle piece, the shape of the white of the eye on the other side. When you break it down like that, that's when you really start to get accurate, because if you draw that accurately, you'll start to get accurate. Now, I've got kind of bags under my eyes because I'm 50 years old. I can go ahead and draw those in. Sketch that in, loose searching lines, look at the actual shapes. You probably don't have a lot of bags in your eyes. Another thing that's good to do, especially since we're going to shade, is maybe lightly outline the shapes of highlights. When I draw the nose, you could kind of build this. Like if you were building this, you could start with kind of a ball shape. If you're doing the basic shapes approach, a ball shape, and the bridge in there, etc. And then you would go back and refine, and etc. So you would come in and get it more accurate. Draw the shadow shapes. There's a shadow shape under my nose here. There's a little shadow shape over here. Lightly sketch those shadow shapes. Build those puzzle pieces. So, and by getting these and kind of working your way down, you can kind of construct and build the face a piece at a time. And no individual shape is that hard, is that big a deal if you take it one little piece at a time. My mustache, I don't need to make a bunch of lines. I can just kind of draw the basic shape of this. Another thing I like to recommend students do, most of you probably don't have mustaches, but this little dimple under your nose and between your mouth is called the philtrum. I like to have you draw that because that gives you a good idea of the distance between the bottom of your nose and top of your lips. A lot of times students will draw this long, crazy gap between the bottom of their nose and the top of their lips. So if you draw the philtrum, that helps give you kind of a way to connect them. And then draw the lips as a shape. Look at the angle of that line going through. Again, you should be using basic shape sketching There's a little shadow under there I might draw. So this is kind of the approach I'd like you to think about. If you notice that your face lines are too wide, go ahead and correct that. Look at things. Check the distance between your eyes and the side of your head over there. Check those distances and see, does that seem to be about right from the corner of your eye to the side of your head? Go ahead and check the distance from like the corner of your mouth to the side of your cheeks and see if that looks right. And then if it's not, if it's off, come back in and adjust your sketch. It's not over till it's over. Check that distance here from the bottom of your lip to the bottom of your chin. If you need to adjust your head shape at that point, go ahead and do that. So I've got this beard. Now, in order to draw the beard, again, if you pay attention not just to the features, but also to the negative shapes. If I draw the shape between my beard and my lips, that has its own shape. Draw the shape of the beard itself, and sketch those things in. For your final portrait, we don't want to just do the head floating in space. You want to get the neck in there. So sketch the shapes you see. Now you're going to be putting on clothing and you're creating a character. So you'll be, so maybe you'll just want to get the neck and not draw the clothes from your reference image. And so then there's the basic thing. I'm also asking you to do ears. My ears are kind of weird. They're kind of close over here, and then my earlobes stick out a bit. Now look at the alignment though. The bottom of the ear is aligned to the bottom of the nose. The top of the ears, aligned to the eyebrow. So those proportions that we learned. If you can see your ears, draw them. If you can't, don't. But I'll be looking for you to draw it naturally as you see it. So again, we started with those generic proportions, made our way down. My drawing here looks very much like a contour line drawing. Yours should look like a sketch. A quick look here, what I mean by sketch, loose sketch portrait. Let's see if we can find some examples that are right. So if the internet wouldn't be so slow. So these are more renderings. These are very tightly, this is about where you want to be. This one's a little bit looser. The internet doesn't always know what I'm asking for. Here's a loose sketch. The loose searching lines. Let's see if what I get for rough sketch. There's a little bit better, I think. There we go. So when you're roughly sketching it in, you see the loose searching lines. It's not perfect. Now, as you shade, all of this rough stuff will get blended in and into your shading. So you won't really see those lines anymore. That's a decent sketch there. Notice they have shading on the highlights and shadows, the shapes of the highlights and shadows. So pay attention to highlights and shadows when you're doing this as well. Again, so don't do contour line like me. Do the sketch technique. Look at one more thing. Basic shape sketching. Oh no, they're just giving me truly basic shapes. So remember how we did this with the animals before? We started with the basic shapes and then built it and refined it. That's still the process you want to take. Only now the shapes are a little bit more complex because you're looking at a forehead shape, an eyebrow shape, and the shape of the negative space between the eyebrow and the eyes, etc., and work your way down. Now, as you develop this drawing, you're going to make a character. So maybe, I don't know, let's take a look here at Disney villains. Let's do male Disney villains. For me here, let's see if we've got somebody with some costumes. Maybe Jafar. So maybe I could do a Jafar costume. Let me find Jafar. Jafar from Aladdin. What's he look like? There's a picture there. Again, when you go to do, you're going to need to have at least 3 features incorporated into your costume. This can be clothing, hats. Now, I had said steampunk is a theme. In my example in the presentation online, and definitely read that presentation, look at the examples and stuff. In that example, I've got a steampunk version of a portrait sketch. So you can look at that and see what I did with that. But here, okay, so maybe I'm going to come in and roughly sketch my beard in to look a little bit more like his. At this point, after you've accurately drawn yourself, you can take maybe some liberties with what you're sketching and being your creative. He's got these things coming up. You can get some other pictures. You can get multiple pictures from multiple angles to make your costume. I'm kind of doing this thing here. You know, these things coming up off the shoulders. He's got these things kind of hanging down. Again, this is a simple little triangle shape. I'm putting in some rough shapes. So I'm sketching that in. I sketch in the hat. I could maybe get a front view of the hat. Let's see if we've got, here's a front view of the hat there. Oops. Let's copy that. Paste it. And so I see the hat. I'm going to you know, look how it curves around the forehead. So I'm going to maybe curve that around. It's overlapping his hairline, so maybe that's curving around. Sketch in the basic shape of that. This comes back here, etc. Again, I'm doing contour lines, but I want to see sketch technique when you do it. And then he's got these things curving up here. So I'm going to build my features onto my character. Oops. Etc. Drew that on the same layer as him. I don't know if you know Photoshop, but you work in layers. Cut that out now. So, you know, so now there I am. So now I've got my rough sketch. I started with that generic proportions, and then I looked at my photo. Now I traced over my photo. I don't want you to trace, but the reason I traced it was so you could see the process I took for building it, kind of a shape at a time, a section at a time. And then once you have this rough sketch in, you can come in with your blended shading technique and really pay attention to the lights and darks. When you are doing your shading, my picture's still in color here, make sure you convert your picture to black and white. And that way you can see the values better. Notice, okay, I'm very much a white dude, but notice my skin, once this is in black and white, isn't white. I'm going to sample like a very light area from my skin, and here it is over here. That's the value. That is almost white, but it's not pure white. So the only thing that's really close to almost pure white is my goatee, the hair on my goatee. I'll sample that very lightest spot. I'll click here on the swatch, and even there you see it's not pure white. Up here is pure white. So you really need to pay attention to matching the values. There are highlight shapes that you shade around. Notice also my eyes, the whites of my eyes. Look how dark. Now here's the white part. When I click in there, look how dark that is. Now, how is it that it's that dark and still the white of my eye? How is that possible? It's because value is relative. When it's surrounded by something even darker, it seems lighter. But your eyes are probably going to be somewhat in shadow, so the whites of your eyes shouldn't even be shaded pure white. So really convert your photo to black and white while you're working in your computer. And when you do your shading, really pay attention to value changes. Remember, to get things 3D, we want to work from dark to light. Look how much lighter this is, or darker this is. I'm going to check this eyedropper here. I'll click that, and there is the color, or the value rather. So down here is that value, and I'm going to switch this, and now I'm going to select this value up here. And look from here to here, from that value to that value, that value to that value. Look at that range of value change as it goes up the side of the cheek. It's not just all middle gray. And it's that transition in value that really starts to give us the illusion of three-dimensional form. Shadows have their own shape. This has a shape that can be shaded right there. It's got its own shape. This has its own shape. Now, this is very doable if you really take your time. That has its own shape. The eyebrow has its own shape. This shadow area under my eye has its own shape. If you even lights and shadows, the highlight here, there's not a definitive edge, but that highlight has a shape. So you shade around highlights and let the white of the paper show through. Now, even though that is, even you can let in your highlights, you can let that be the white of your paper. You don't have to shade as light as possible for that. But only let the true highlights be the white of your paper. There's a highlight. I got light coming in from the side here. Paying attention to light and shadow is a big deal when you're drawing. So again, that's kind of the approach to developing your character sketch. You'll be looking at it freehand, then you'll be shading it. All right, guys, so let's see if I can stop this recording, and hopefully that is helpful.